A badge of honor. Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today. And the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We are powered by the OBBM network, and I tell you, you can find us on every platform, and even now on your TV on your favorite Roku channel, Roku channel.
Roku on the OBBM network. Yep.
On the OBBM. You know, we are really coming down to wrapping up month of May, which is our police officer appreciation and honoring our law enforcement officers across the nation, along with Memorial Day that's coming up at the end of the month. And we want to touch on a little things about Memorial Day. It's a day to honor and remember and respect those who died for our country. It's not about burgers and beers, though it's not a bad thing to have them. But you know what? We also have to remember why we're allowed to have those burgers and beers. Because if we were sitting in North Korea, we would not be able to have that. So those men who fought and died throughout our military generations give us that opportunity and allow us to be here today, me and Sam speaking on this podcast to help you guys out in a mental health way or in any way and get our voices heard. So I want to thank all our veterans throughout our country who have fought and served and died for us.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And it's so important, however you choose to commemorate and memorialize Memorial Day. It's not about celebrating. I can't tell you how many posts people have been making that it's like my Steve says I'm so red because I'm like, because you don't celebrate Memorial Day.
Well, people don't know that. People don't know that because people know that. People know that it's Memorial Day, and this is Memorial May, and it is something that you don't have to look far, to recognize that. So stay away from the mattress sales and do something worthwhile and give back to those that have given so much. Our active duty personnel still spread across the globe, doing some crazy stuff right now. But this is our Memorial May series, if you will, on this podcast. We do it every May, and we bring on Carry the Load nonprofit partners, part of the Continuum of Care program. And what that means is when we raise money for Carry the Load, it comes back to our program so that we can give that money to our veterans, our active duty personnel, our first responder. And we feature those partners. And tonight it is no different. I will say these guys, William shared his story at Summit this year that we did with Carry the Load to kind of kick things off and get prepared for the Memorial Day weekend. And you could hear a pin drop in that room. And immediately I knew that I wanted to make a connection with him, that we needed to get him on this podcast, because what he and his team have developed and continue to develop is revolutionary. It's unlike anything out there. And so we're just going to bring him on. Let's not waste any more time. William Negley, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast.
Thank you. What an introduction.
It is true. And the videos on the website that you have continue to tell the story. So why don't we start by having you tell everybody watching and listening
about you and your story.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. And, super excited to be part of Carry the Load this year. And I'd be remiss if, didn't share the sort of familial connection to Steve and Clint. But, we can talk about that in a bit. But my story is grew up in San Antonio, Texas, was 17 on September 11th, had already sort of known I was interested in going into service and to serving my country. Certainly 9/11, was crystallizing of that sort of view of my life. Went to University of San Diego for college, expecting to go into the military afterwards. Was a rower in college. And when I was getting ready to enlist to go to BUD/S, a lingering back injury sort of presented itself. And I said, all right, I'm not going to BUD/S with a bad back. That's a recipe for failure. Mm-hmm. And so I finished a master's program at University of San Diego. And when you do a master's in international relations, the 3-letter agencies kind of start to come out of the woodwork. And I was still very hungry to get in the fight and serve. So I moved to DC, joined the Central Intelligence Agency in 2009, and was doing all counterterrorism, counterintelligence, Pakistan, Afghanistan. At that period, much of the national security apparatus of this country was focused on that part of the world. And then a couple of years later, we started to hear this 22 veteran suicide a day number start to kind of societally permeate. And I think it's fair to say that that's when my professional life sort of started to not take a different direction, but certainly a direction I never anticipated to. A path I never expected to walk down, but has now been really my life for 10 plus years in developing Sound Off.
And Sound Off, you went into exploring the mental health field, and you really wanted to apply that to some high-level CEOs, athletes, and things like that.
So you're understandably conflating two stories, but so I come back. We start to hear this 22 suicide a day number in 21. That's when that number starts to come out, and it was just clear as day, obvious to me that there was a fundamental flaw in how we are supporting the veteran service member community, and a flaw that I suspect, resonates with every law enforcement first responder, watching this podcast. That flaw was that it did not matter how much money anybody was spending, VA, DoD, nonprofit. If the Grizzly Navy SEAL, CIA officer, Marine wouldn't come in, sit down on a couch and talk about what's going on, the money and the resources were irrelevant. I didn't know any of the data. I didn't know any of the research. I just knew it because I was living it. My best friend, who's about to go to Yemen on his first tour tomorrow, is never going to expose himself in a way that he feels would jeopardize his reputation or career. He's not going to walk into CIA mental health services. Obviously, that is not true of everybody, but it is certainly true of many. So it seemed equally intuitive and obvious. If the fundamental barrier here is I don't want anyone to know that I am seeking help, why don't we just allow them to seek help without anybody knowing? That seemingly simple idea proved itself to be far more complex and difficult to accomplish than I ever thought. But I came back from Afghanistan in 2013, and I said, I have to try this. I have to try and launch this organization. And the vision was ultimately what we brought to fruition, right? An app that would allow you to maintain anonymity, but simultaneously allow you to talk to a clinician or a peer on an ongoing basis. So I'm trying to raise money to launch this organization. We know we have to be a nonprofit because it's basically impossible to bill for anonymous mental health support. So we're trying to raise money. I end up going to business school at the University of Texas. And that summer, between my first and second year, I'm walking on stage in a new venture creation class. And I have some classmates that are helping me just tease out whether this model of support could be for profit for what you alluded to. So like athletes or, finance types, something like that. I'm literally walking on stage to discuss this. And I get a call that my brother-in-law had died by suicide. And so, the part of the story of moving to San Diego that I skipped over is that the first weekend I'm in San Diego, my sister moved with me, which in hindsight's totally weird. But, I was going to be a freshman in college and my 25-year-old sister was moving with me. But we were living in Pacific Beach and she knows some girls from Texas, Texans stick together. She knows some girls from Texas that are going to a party down the street at a guy's house from Texas. Well, that guy was Steve Hall, the co-founder of Carry the Load. And Steve Hawley was at the time a number 2 officer in a SEAL Team 5 platoon. And Bill Mulder was one of his SEALs. So Bill and my sister met that night. Fast forward 15 years, Bill has done 20 years in the SEAL teams, the last 14 or so at Naval Special Warfare Development Group, quote unquote SEAL Team 6. And unbeknownst to me, the last couple of years of his time in the Navy, he has been deeply, deeply, deeply struggling and really, frankly, refusing, at least early on, to engage with mental health support. Because he had spent his entire professional life working to get, to play for the Patriots, right? I mean, to be on Dev Group is a big deal. Yeah. And he was never going to expose himself in a way that he felt would jeopardize his reputation or career. So the intersection of Sydney and I's life is that I'm running around with PowerPoint decks and RAND studies talking about stigmatization and barriers to seeking care. And hey, I have this piece of technology that I'm pretty sure could address this. And this problem is so insidious, it's going on in my own family and I don't know it. So Bill dies June 9th, 2017. And my sister and I, in what can really only be described as, cosmic intersection of fate, then come together to really raise the capital to launch this organization, to bring it to fruition to what it is today.
Wow. And that if you're listening, that is part of this story that you told to a packed house at Carry the Load. And, when things touch you personally, that's when it's like you sit up and take notice. We've got to take our first break. We will come back and continue this amazing story with William Negley, the CEO and founder of Sound Off. Stay tuned, everybody.
Move freely, America, without medical restrictions or penalty. Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Move freely, America, with one voice, without fear of retribution, achieving a common goal, medical freedom. We the people make our voices heard by connecting with state legislators and engaging a constitutionally compliant medical bill of rights for all citizens. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Move Freely America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move Freely America. My voice.
And my voice.
And together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We are powered by the OBBM network. Our guest, William Negley, has just shared an amazing story with us on mental health and the stigma that, when we say some of our veterans and law enforcement and first responders are all suffering, man, this goes up to the highest ranks. Will, you were saying that, you are a former operative with the CIA. So even at those highest levels, we still have that problem of stigma. We have the problem of people afraid to reach out because they are afraid that their career is going to be derailed, or they're not going to be, they're not going to achieve what they need to achieve. You bring so much knowledge and research to this that I got to ask you, why do you think, or where did it start with this stigma that people are so afraid to ask for help? And how do we, I mean, it's a slow change, but how do we build that confidence back up?
I really don't actually like the term stigma because I think it's an oversimplification of the problem. So the way I discuss this is there's really two different elements to this. People want to conflate them, but I see them as very different. There is cultural concern. I don't want friends, family, community, colleagues to know I'm seeking help. No doubt that is evolving, right? And I think that civilizational perceptions of mental health are evolving. I also think that, particularly within the military or the special operations community, everybody has been burned down so badly in the last 20 plus years. The I don't know, shame of that experience is shared. I mean, everybody has experienced it themselves or in a very close loved one. So I do think that is evolving. But then there is a much more challenging problem, which is a concern, legitimate or not, and we can have that discussion in a moment, of professional blowback. And this is a much more challenging issue to address. And let me say up front, the Department of Defense, the intelligence community have gone through the laborious bureaucratic effort to try and make systemic changes in this. No doubt, deserve credit, right? And if you look at SF-86s, right, security clearance forms, there's been a lot of sort of policy bureaucratic work put into, well, let's try and make it so that, the way I discuss it is the line of when I need to know is as far, left, right, to the waiting point as possible. The problem, as I see it, is there's always going to be a line, right? U.S. Navy, quite reasonably, is never going to say, I don't need to know if my F-18 pilots are drinking too much, right? Like understandably, they're going to say, hey, sorry, I need to know if you are, in a mental health challenge and you are operating a B-2 bomber. Like, now, they to be clear, they've done good work in attempting to keep those people, still flying, still engaged, while engaging with treatment. But the fact that that line exists, we know definitively suppresses some people from seeking care, right? And I'll give you a quote that I just love because it so precisely summarizes this. There's a group of helicopter pilots, the Night Stalker, best helicopter pilots the military has. And I was speaking to a former leader of that organization about sound off, and he said, we need this more than anybody because you've never met a sick pilot, right? All we do if we raise our hand is jeopardize our flight status, which is to jeopardize our careers. So as long as that line exists, not talking about the cultural element, but the professional blowback element, there's going to be a population that says, I'm not even walking in the rim. Because if I say the wrong thing, I'm smoked. And again, we can have a discussion about where that line is that, a credible concern or not. But as long as there's a line, there's going to be a percentage that won't walk in the rim. And that's why we exist, to say, well, we can offer you clinical or peer support, and we don't need to know who you are. That's our entire reason for existence.
That's fantastic. And let's get into the nuts and bolts of how Sound Off is able to do that. And we're going to do that right after our next quick break. Stay tuned, everybody.
Interested in starting a podcast or TV show? Worried about what you'll say and how to keep it engaging? Think you'd like to be a guest on podcast, radio, or TV shows? Hi, I'm Susan Hamilton, owner and founder of OBBM Network, and I would like to invite you to an OBBM media training to get the tools you need for a relaxed and polished performance we'll be proud to share. Our specialized training techniques include role play, voice training, and everything you need to deliver a confident, clear, and engaging interaction. Go to offbeatbusiness.com. Go to the calendar and register for a training that's convenient for you. Dates available now, 214-714-0495.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast powered by the OBBM Network with John and Sam and our guest, William Negley of Sound Off.
I was like, what? We went somewhere.
Negley, the conversation has been very, very stimulating, to tell you the truth, because we're touching on, but we've been touching on things, and we can go down so many different avenues, and like William, when you brought up the fighter pilots, and I get it, but you know what? What's the difference between our fighter pilots? Maybe you can explain this to me, or a Southwest airline pilot, right? Who's got 250 souls on board, or an air traffic controller who is at Kennedy Airport bringing in all these different planes, and I agree there's a line. I definitely agree there's a line, but you can't tell me, and we just fail to recognize sometimes everybody has thoughts of suicide. Everybody, if you're in law enforcement, if you're in big business, a CEO, if you're a athlete, whatever it is, everybody's had that one thought or two thoughts of suicide because they feel the pressure has overcome them and they don't know how to get out. And it's time to embrace that and go, that's not a weakness. That's a strength that you can acknowledge, And once we start looking at it as you seeking mental health is your strong point and not a weakness. And yes, if you cross that line, we may have to make adjustments. But some people never get up to that line. But they just get those feelings, and let's stop it before it gets to that feeling.
And I cannot definitively say that this has happened on Sound Off, but I would paint another scenario. Right now, the SEAL pilot, whatever role, who is dealing with this and not engaging with care out of concern of again, not deploying, losing flight status or whatever. Well, the person that they are supposed to be engaging with is simultaneously the person that the very act of talking to them is what jeopardizes that status, right? If I go internal DoD and say, hey, this is what's going on, the very act of that discussion jeopardizes my ability to do the job. What I emphasize to DoD leadership about sound off is that there's this, I would submit misconception that, oh man, this is going to keep all these people that don't need to be flying or don't need to be deploying kind of quote unquote in the fight. Like they're going to be going places they shouldn't go. I think that's a misconception. I think the ability to, in a quote unquote safe space, process here and say, hey, I'm thinking about, maybe I don't need to go on this deployment, or maybe I need to stop flying for a little while. Process that in an environment where you can safely have that conversation without inherently jeopardizing yourself, I would submit increases the probability of that individual coming internal and saying, hey, I need to not go on this deployment or, fly this jet right now. And the irony is, and I was briefing a group of intel officers about 6 months ago, and their leadership was emphasizing this. That scenario where someone is stepping forward themselves and kind of raising their hand is the best possible scenario for all involved. It's the best thing for their career, maintenance. It's the best thing for kind of the agency or DoD. It's the lowest risk for everybody, but it's just challenging, exactly to your point, for people to get there. And to your initial point of sort of what we would call demographics outside of the Department of Defense facing this challenge, physicians deal with this. The number of physicians that pay cash for mental health support because they're concerned about insurance with their hospital system, certainly pilots. I mean, we saw that. We're really seeing it right now at a level that, a level of discussion of commercial pilot mental health support. They don't seek care because they know, if somebody pulls my car, my flight status. So this is it. It's just not an totally uncommon problem to have this conflict between, if I seek care, I can't do my job, but that very reality prevents me from seeking care in the first place.
Double-edged sword.
Vicious circle. Yeah. And somebody can stay in that circle. And unfortunately, if they just stop and stay there and don't raise their hand to get the help, the outcome is usually not great. And I have the website sound-off.com for those of you listening on your favorite podcast app. If you go on the website, it kind of gives you a little, it's almost a teaser. It's great.
It gives you a lot of information. I'm looking at it now.
Of how it works.
Yeah.
But the key is, let's talk about the anonymity part, because you have like an example up there that I think is this is smashing through the wall to be like, okay, you don't even know my name? What?
The way that we deal with stigma now is the Marine Corps Commandant coming on AFN and saying, if you're struggling, go get help, right? And while I think that's good, I think we can all confidently say it's certainly not sufficient.
Right.
So, we just sort of flip the script and say, well, instead of trying to convince you to essentially get over it, is kind of frankly how I would say that, we're going to structure our care in such a way that there's literally no reason to be concerned about seeking support, right? So, and it's as a small tangent for one moment, it's ironic in hindsight that I'm sitting at the CIA on encrypted computer systems, in pseudonym, all of these things, and sound off is magically what is spit out 10 years later, because it's ultimately a very similar sort of model. So when a veteran service member or intelligence community officer comes to sound off to seek support, We don't ask for your name. We don't ask for your email. We don't ask for your phone number. Not only do we not ask for those things, there is no mechanism for you to give us that information. We assign you a pseudonym. So we're going to say you are Red Cat 176. We are going to allow you to engage with a clinician or a screened and trained peer. We partner with other foundations and nonprofits that help either provide clinical or peer support or underwrite clinical or peer support. So the sort of prototypical examples are if you say you're a Navy SEAL or you're a Green Beret, you can access my mom, who's a volunteer clinician. You could also access one of our contract clinicians, and then the Navy SEAL Foundation or Special Forces Charitable Trust are going to underwrite that too. We then drop you into an end-to-end encrypted chat with that clinician, and that clinician or peer are able to provide a VoIP call internal to the application. So you can have telephonic engagement, again, without having to know any identifying information about who you are. So it's really a pretty simple utilization of existing technology. It's just kind of putting it all together in a way that nobody had ever done before, in part because it's really, really challenging to make money off of it. So, a lot of organizations in this space are profit motivated, and we were not.
Well, how easy is it for like this app, right? A guy going into the military, just starting out, right? Going to sign the papers, the whole bit. Is this something that from the moment he speaks with his recruiter should turn around and go, hey, let's sign the papers, but I need you to download this app because throughout your career, you may need to access this, and be very transparent, and we get these young kids signing up, and now they know it's there. They know it's okay from the recruiter's point saying, here you go. These are the tools you're going to need.
It's really interesting the way that you asked that question, because I get asked all the time, hey, what is, tell me your measures of success. We've got, a million KPIs that we track in the system. But what I emphasize is, look, somebody who comes onto our platform that then in our first survey says, I'm not going anywhere else. Like, let's be clear. I'm not going to VA, I'm not going to DoD, I'm not going anywhere else. Well, I would submit, even if that person is not engaging with a clinician or a peer, but they're, the kind of metaphor is they're sitting in the doctor's office. I'm not saying that's total success, but I would say that's a win. And we see that, right? We see people come in, they register for the app, and 6 months later, they choose to engage with somebody. My sister and I, we haven't shared this publicly, but just last week, we basically spent the whole week on Capitol Hill, talking to members about bringing a Department of Defense clinical program, kind of already funded program, into Sound Off. So not giving us money, but bringing clinical capacity into the system.
That's great.
So we're really hopeful that happens, that we can get that done. That would be obviously massive clinical capacity brought online. And then, hey, you're already spending this $1 billion a year or whatever it is on these clinicians. Like, let's make sure that this sort of literally and figuratively gets in every service member's pocket.
That is fantastic to hear. And yeah, we'll definitely send up the, good luck fairies or whatever you call it, vibes out there. So with getting to vetted care, meaning and these DoD clinicians are obviously with DoD for a reason. The thing that John and I, emphasize a lot is, hey, it's a matter of connecting with somebody that gets what you do.
Yeah.
It's not otherwise that trust factor, can get broken down. How so far have you been able to get those clinicians vetted to say, hey, you're going to talk to some men and women that have, seen some shit and, in a battle space to say, hey, I get that battle space?
So let me answer that question, but let me also slightly challenge the premise. And I'll give you the example that I always give in this discussion. My mother, does not know. I mean, maybe now she does, but does not know the difference between a Marine and a soldier. Right? I mean, just not.
I have a feeling she might though.
Just not her universe. So just as the fact that she had a son going to the CIA, like, just wild to her. But I can tell you very definitively, like, she saved more than a couple veterans' lives, right? I mean, because she's a damn good clinician. So, but I think it goes exactly to your point that she was able to establish trust, and that trust wasn't built on, I know what you did, downrange. Because of course I don't know what you did downrange, right? How could I possibly know that? But there was still a deep trust built. Now, maybe this is just me tooting my mom's horn, right? And maybe she's the exception to the rule. But I also fully acknowledge, respect, and know, hey, it's really helpful if there's like some cultural context to what it is I've done, what I'm going through. And ironically, my mom may not know the difference between a soldier and a Marine, but she does have a lot of that cultural context. So the preponderance of our clinicians are either former VA, they may be service member family members. For our contract clinicians, we require them to go through some VA training that is required for what's called the Mission Act. So we really look for that, okay, is this, but it's somewhat a self-selecting thing because people that are coming to us because they care about this space.
Absolutely. And that's the important thing, is that you've established that base, where it is that level of trust right off the bat, like, hey, sound off, I know they've got my back. We got to take our next quick break. We will be right back to discuss more about Sound Off and how we can download the app and do all that kind of good stuff. Stay tuned, everybody.
All right.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with William Negley, with Sound Off, a very, very an app. I just lost the word. I had it in my brain because of my memory loss. A helpful and useful app that should be downloaded if you are in the military. I know, William, we discussed you are furthering your app for other fields later on, but right now we're focused on our veterans. We spoke a little bit before we came on with the numbers, and that kind of confuses a lot of people. on your website, it says 17, then it was 22. Then, some administrations say it's 36. Yeah. One is too many. One is too many. But I think these numbers either scare people or I don't know why are we throwing out all these random numbers? How are we justifying these?
I mean, the numbers thing is, is really, I agree with that last point, right? Like just the numbers. And I mean, I think the 22 a day, this community sort of looked around, saw probably on a more visceral level what was going on in their community. And then the 22 number came out, and that really just became kind of a rallying cry for, we got a major, major problem. And, unfortunately, and I've read every, study out there on the numbers, and certainly all the VA annual suicide reports. There's maybe been years here or there where things have been a little bit better, but fundamentally it's as bad as it's ever been. To your exact question, when it first came out, it was 22. Then it dropped to 17. That was a counting function. That was not, the problem got better. That was who is being counted in this equation or in this process by the VA. What is a point of major contention that I would respectfully submit the VA would choose to just look past is America's Warrior Partnership 2 years ago put out a study, really, or at least preliminary elements of a study, really challenging that number. And there was two fundamental elements to that challenge. The first was just simply, you are undercounting veterans who have died by suicide. Like, you're just straight missing some of these individuals. And then the second, which is can't be disputed, because the VA says, yeah, you're right, we're not including these individuals, are veterans who die. They have a technical term for it, but it is essentially something like an overdose, where, okay, this is not suicide, but clearly this is a self-inflicted mortality that one might reasonably submit within this community is tied to the mental health challenges that this community disproportionately face. That they would consider motorcycle accidents, or kind of some of them
risky behavior accidents.
Exactly. So, it's really, I think that the bottom line number is it's as bad as it's ever been. And if anything, it's getting worse. And, just the one thing to emphasize, when that 22 number first came out, people thought, oh, this is all young post 9/11 veterans. It was majority Vietnam veterans. And now it was disproportionately young veterans. But I bring this up to say we are still, tragically, I would submit, at the beginning of this problem. This is not going anywhere. God willing, we have put enough resources into this that we'll see a different trajectory than the Vietnam sort of era veteran population. But we still got a long fight ahead of us.
You bring up
we've
the
seen
Vietnam.
the same thing well, John, I think we're going to say the same thing. We've seen the same thing in terms of numbers with our first responders, is that, it was a drug overdose. And it's like, you could infer that, the type of behavior.
When you look at Vietnam veterans and you look at the newer military, the two different generations, right? Vietnam veterans were the suck it up, I'm not asking for help, and they are the ones that are now feeling it in their 60s and 70s and 80s. How do we get those guys? How do we get those guys to download an app? They're not all that technically savvy. Yes, it's great for the younger guys, but is it easy enough for one of our Vietnam vets who is in his early 70s to navigate through this app and help him out from his living room couch? Maybe he's a little disabled,
I certainly hope so. I mean, we built it, to be as clean and simple and just sort of as a organization leader, decision maker sort of tangent. A lot of these apps, a lot of the technology efforts in this, they just try and cram 100 different things into, lists of resources in an app. And I've really been in the business of saying, no, we're not including this and this and this, just to keep it really focused on what it does. But, I'll just say two points to your question. The first is, look, it's unlikely that we're going to be the only app, in existence that disproportionately hits, seniors, right? I mean, there's just more natural engagement with the younger population. And then, I just would share sort of my sort of vision fantasy of sound off from day zero. Not to say that the 70-year-old, in his living room on his couch, we don't want him on it. We do. But there's such a natural, especially in the technology elements of veteran mental health, there's such a natural focus on kind of the last mile, right? Or tragically the last 5 minutes, right? The real, truly acute suicidal situation. And what I emphasize is that was never really my vision for this. My vision for this was the SEAL, pilot, Marine, half drunk, 2 a.m., probably knows they should be talking to somebody, definitely isn't going to walk into somebody's office the next day, 5-10 years into their career. Oh, but they've heard about sound off. If we catch them there, right? If we catch them, it's a very nasty term to use in this discussion, but it is the term, way left of bang, right? If we get them there, how does that change the trajectory of the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years of that individual's life?
Right.
And so we want the 70-year-old Vietnam vets, coming to sound off for sure. But, no doubt the sort of initial vision of this was that person really making I'll share with you the data point. 47% of post 9/11s and veterans of service members and veterans who are deployed who meet the definition of major depression or PTSI are actively choosing not to seek help. Yeah. So half of these men and women, and the data skews up from there. There's 15 studies on this. Half of these men and women probably know they should be engaging with help and are choosing not to engage with help. Not they don't have access to it, but I'm choosing not to do this for all the reasons we've discussed. So if we can get that person to be comfortable, safe, engaging, how does that change that trajectory?
That's a large number.
Yeah, well, it's also important, and William, you hit the nail on the head, because it literally, Sound Off is available on the Apple platform. You can download it through the whatever. I don't have an iPhone. And then on Google Play as well, you set up your profile, if you will, and it is very simply laid out. Which it is one of my things when you have somebody that is in crisis or just needs to talk. You do not want to have them navigate through a million things, because what it will be F you, and they throw the phone. We already know that. So it is beautifully done. This hour has gone by so fast. I had the website up. It's sound-off.com. If you're in the Dallas area and you want to meet William and his staff in person, come on down to Revolution Park over Memorial Day, that Sunday, Monday. He will be there. We will be there. And you can talk to him in person and have him navigate.
If I may, just one plug. If you're a veteran service member, Sound Off offers clinical support. We also offer peer support. So we are always recruiting peers. You download the app. We're going to validate who you are. We're going to validate you're a vet. We're going to point you to a new peer support training partner. But without you, without the peers coming on to talk to fellow service members and veterans, this whole thing doesn't work. So please come on, download the app, sign up to be a peer supporter. It's really important that we have people there to literally figuratively answer the call.
That is awesome. And yes, it is vital. So if you are an active service member, a veteran, contact William, go to sound-off.com. And we'll put, have that in the show notes. So you guys can do that. William, thank you so much. We are looking forward to, I'm looking forward to seeing you again. John, you'll meet and the rest of the team next week. And just thank you so much for just caring, because when it comes from here, and we can tell, even if you're listening on a podcast app, you can tell that, William, this comes from the heart, and hopefully no one else will have to be touched by a loss by suicide. So thank you so much.
Yes.
All right.
Well,
see you soon.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you.
All right. This is about the best first responders. It's coming. It is coming. William, we talked before we went live. It just in app world, it's one step at a time. But it is coming. So please, be patient. Peer support is out there. You can reach out to us. We can connect you. But if you're a veteran and serve as a first responder, Sound Off is available to you. So go ahead and download it on your phone and get started. So we can't thank William enough. And Carry the Load is coming up. I said it's Memorial Day. It's like it's here. Boom. Another Memorial Day. If you're within 3 hours driving distance to downtown Dallas, you want to be with us at Revolution Park to step off with Carry the Load. It's 5 relays going on right now. They're in week 4. They're all going to come to Dallas, and we are going to step off together late in the afternoon on Sunday. And so, you can find out more information by visiting our website, badgeofhonor.org. We've got a pop-up there. Just hit it. You can be with our team if you want and raise money, or you can direct donate. And like I said at the beginning of the show, this is all part of Sound Off, us, and this entire month we have featured nonprofit partners, and that means that money comes back to us that we in turn put into serving our first responders, our veterans, our active duty personnel, and families of our veterans and active duty as well. So go to badgeofhonor.org. It's also a place where you can see what we're doing, all the events that are coming up, reminders to tune into the podcast. And wherever you are watching from, thank you. Thank you for tuning in each week. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button, that little bell on YouTube so you'll never miss an episode. Check us out on Roku. This episode will go up this week. So if you miss anything, you can go back and we'll hit the replay tomorrow. And, to everybody out there, to our first responders, we pray for you every single day. Thank you for what you do to keep our communities safe. For our veterans, thank you for what you did to allow us to have the voice in this platform every single week to talk about whatever we want. It's called freedom, baby. For our active duty personnel who are serving, and they are spread out and spread thin across the world, thank you for what you do, keeping our shores safe here at home. John, take us home.
I just want to dedicate today's show to the entire Chicago Police Department. They lost a member, a 29-year-old member, due to post-traumatic stress. Want to dedicate today's show to him, and hopefully any members in the Chicago Police Force see that as a sign. If you're battling, to get help, do not hesitate, because once you go down that rabbit hole, it's very hard to get out. So before you get down that rabbit hole, seek help. It's a sign of strength, not weakness. Peace.
Till next week, everybody. Take care.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.